So welcome everyone to episode 2 of SteelTalk, powered by SteelTalk. And it's great to have your company. For those that are new to this webinar, welcome. And for those that are returning, great to see you back. But you might wonder why on earth are 3 shed guys holding a webinar? And sometimes I ask myself the same question. But we're passionate about helping people. And it came up the other day, probably eight weeks ago or so. Shane, who's on the call here today, he's like, how do we educate our clients? How do we educate the market to be smarter in sheds? So an idea was born, and as a result, we're up to episode number two, and looking forward to holding monthly webinars down the track. So we're excited to bring you number 2, and episode today is designing a commercial structure. So we'll jump into the session and look forward to this session.
It'll be good. Righto, so a bit about us. We're a family-owned company based down here in North Victoria, and we specialise in commercial and agricultural structures. And a bit of backstory, my father Ross started the business 20 or so years ago, and here we are today with 4 of his boys in the business, and me being one of them, Shane being another. And we also have Josh. Josh is our brother-in-law on the call today, and he's the father of three little boys. And what else about you, Josh? You love your Panthers up there in Penrith Panthers. And Shane's my eldest brother, and he's been in the business since he left school, been pretty much in every part of the business, and he enjoys full driving on the weekends, and he also is a keen Hawk supporter. So
that's probably not such a good fact this time of year. But a bit about Aaron. Aaron heads up our sales department here at SteelTalk. Aaron's pretty passionate about creating pretty looking structures. So I was getting into design and getting the concepts right. But outside of SteelTalk, Aaron's pretty passionate about haircuts. So if anyone needs a fresh fade, be free to send a message to Aaron, and I'm sure he'll be able to help you out. And unfortunately, I don't know whether it's a fact, fortunate or not, but an avid Carlton Blue supporter, which is it's another fact. So
not so good full drive. Fellow, but had a bit of an incident the other day where I rolled a full drive. It's actually Shane's. Probably was actually the unit itself.
Right, so that's about us. Great to have a company, and as a family business, we're all about just helping you make the best possible shed decision. Okay, so the problem we're trying to solve here today, ladies and gents, is, in our opinion, many people fail to think long term when they're designing or planning for their commercial structure. Now, Shane's got some points here about this point.
Yeah, so over the past few years, we've worked with many people just like you on their commercial projects. And in that time, we've discovered that many people fail to think long term when planning and designing their commercial structure. And the result is the structure extensions and new builds, and ultimately the whole lot is burned up cash.
That's it. So we want to try and avoid that problem for you, whether you're at the start of a new commercial shed journey or maybe a long way off. We want to try and make sure you're well prepared for your commercial build. So the solution may sound simple, but getting the design right from the start could really make or break your investment, Shane. Is that right?
Yeah, it's a large investment decision. It's probably the largest decision investment that you'd make in your entire life. So getting the design right from the start can ensure a long-term usability whilst never overlooking the return on investment on your structure.
That's it. So you want to sort of slow down the process. You want to, doesn't mean going back and forth with third parties and whatnot, but really just slowing it down and getting the design right from the start.
That's a good point, Aaron. So council delays, we're not saying, put on the back burner exactly, but a little bit of homework along the way or before the process can go a long way in ensuring your ROI, return on investment, is satisfactory. That's good. So there we had the problem and now the solution, and now we're going to give you the five key areas or the secret sauce that you can go away with today to ensure that your next build stacks up financially for you. So Shane, what are the 5 points we're covering today?
Yeah, the 5 points we're covering is consider your return on investment, get the right land for you, ensure the structure is purpose built, and don't overlook the office requirements and also additional features that you can have on your structure.
Perfect, love it. So there's 5 key areas we've identified. Now there could be more, but they're the ones that we think if you get them right, you're on the right way to making sure your commercial build stacks up. And there's a question and answer box in the bottom. So if anyone's got any questions throughout this short session, be free to drop them in the question box, and we'll allocate a few minutes at the end to tidy these up.
Sounds good.
And excited to let you guys know that we are giving you a bit of a giveaway for 10 lucky people that hang around until the end. An exciting pack will be made available. So be free to stick around and keep your eyes open for the instructions there. So let's get stuck into the 5 key areas. And as we touched on, probably the biggest important or the most important decision really is to ensure you've got a decent return on your investment. I think Shane touched on it earlier that this commercial shed you build could be a $5, $10, $20 million investment, probably the largest financial investment you'll make in your life. So you can't be making errors in this phase. Shane.
Yes, so when you're building your structure, you need to consider the location that you're in. So do some research on your area, look into the real estate trends, and avoid over capitalising on your structure. And be sure that to look into your business plan growth. You don't want to waste your space, so you don't want to make your structure too big, nor do you want to make your structure too small so that it doesn't fit in with your business plan.
Could result in having to do extensions down the track, which ultimately, obviously, not going to be cost effective. So if you get it right from the start, you can take into account all this and avoid having to spend that, burn your cash, pretty much.
That's great. And I think just to recap on the business plan point there, Shane, what we mean by this is sit down with your team or your executive people, or maybe your financial planners or your accountants, whatever, your bankers, and come up with a business plan that is future-proofed. And off the back of that, you might think 3, 5, 10 years ahead. We want to be creating a structure that is going to see you out in that time. It's going to be suitable for you for that business plan. Because too often we see clients don't think long term, and they come back to us, with issues or size constraints, which are terribly uneconomic, all to fix. And this example here, Shane, is a real good example here of what's gone wrong here.
Yeah, so we had an example of a client that came to us that they built a structure about 2 years ago, and they 2 years later down the track they realised their structure's not high enough, so they asked us can we raise the roof. Now that's a major change to a structure. You may as well start again, because to lift the roof of a structure, it's basically pull the structure down and start again.
And it doesn't look good internally, and it means a lot of on-site fabrication and all that sort of gear. So it does cost you.
Yeah. So hindsight is a lovely thing, and it would be a great skill to have. But in this instance, the client may not have thought long-term enough around their business plans or activities, and it's only 2 years later they're looking down a couple of meters on their shed height, which it just doesn't sound right, does it, Shane?
Yeah, that's right.
That's it. So that's point one, making sure that your investment stacks up financially.
And so touching on, if you can't afford the size structure now, then you can actually design the structure to allow for that future extensions and so forth, which is probably a more economical approach.
That's it. It's not everyone's got the cash up front. So when you're talking to your shed designer, say, look, I want to go this far today. In 3 years' time, I want to be able to do, an extension of 5 bays. So that can certainly be factored in for a more economical extension down the track.
Yep.
That's great. So point 2 is all about the land. And really key here is to ensure that you decide on a right property for your commercial build. Aaron.
Yeah, so once you've obviously, now that we've covered that first point, you've got your structure, the size structure you're after and you require, you're out to find a block of land that's going to suit to accommodate that structure. And you need a little bit of research on that property or whatever property you find to look at the building envelope. So see what setbacks and easements are on the property, and also allows for vehicle access. So think about the turning circles, ready loading bays and parking. And there's also your landscaping, gardening and tanks and all sorts of things that you got to consider to make room for. So look into that, and also consider fire safety. So there's fire safety requirements for setbacks to allow for emergency vehicle access and so forth.
So what I'm hearing here is, sorry to butt in there, Aaron. Yes, get the shed design right first. And before you part with any cash for land, find the block that's going to not compromise your shed design. Now, what we mean by that is there's a few points here which limit where you can build or restrict the build area on your land. So if you do some basic research up front before you invest in land, that will save you having to compromise the actual design of the structure and start playing around with dimensions and how it sits on the block. Shane, you had an example you want to share with us?
Yeah, so we had a client that we were designing a nice structure for, and we had all the design done and on the property, and it was all facing the right way, the best way for facing east and all the rest of it. And then we realised that the property had a 14-metre easement down one side.
Also butt in there, Shane. Just for those on the call that may not know the terminology here, can you just give us a bit of a quick wrap up on what a setback or an easement might be for a piece of land, Shane? So
an easement is a service asset that runs in your land. It could be underground, so it could be a drainage easement, or it could be a sewerage easement, could be a power line easement. So in this instance, it's a power line easement and a drainage easement, which is 14 metres, all down one side of the 140 metre long property.
So it meant you had to reconfigure where your structure and configure the structure completely, didn't it? Yeah.
So lucky the site was big enough, we could flip the structure around the other way and put it on the other side of the block, and that way it still worked.
So this example we share here is a bit of a lucky one. Just due to being a large block, we're able to quite easily reconfigure the layout on the property. But a 14-metre easement is quite a significant amount, isn't it, Shane?
Yeah, I mean, it does take up a fair bit of the property, and also as a drainage easement, you can't even have any traffic on that part of the property.
That's it. So I guess in summary here around property, do your homework on the property that you've got your eyes on before you part with your cash. An easement or a setback could really compromise your shed design, and as a result, the design you've come up with might no longer tie in with your business plan. So really important one to consider. That's great. The next point we want to jump into here is really making sure that the design you've come up with is purpose built for you, purpose built for your business and your business plan. Shane, over to you.
Yeah, so when you're building a structure, you've got to make sure you know what the building use is going to be. So if it's going to be a warehouse, consider the need for pallet space requirements. Make sure you've got sufficient access for inbound, outbound goods, and obviously you've got to allow for loading docks and awnings. If it's a manufacturing facility, you might need a clear span structure. You might need to allow for gantry cranes and allow for the process flow. If it's a storage complex, well, then the structure is going to have a series of partition walls and openings. And also, you've got to consider the building contents. So consider, do you know what you're going to be storing in your structure? Is it going to be a hazardous good? If they're hazardous materials, you might need to have certain levels of fire safety in that structure. And then you could be an investor. And so that if you're an investor building a structure for an investment, you might not have any idea who's going to be using that structure. So you need to make the structure a purpose-built structure.
That's it. And in this instance here, this example here in that picture, you can see it's quite a good looking structure. But this is a structure down in Geelong. It's actually divided into 8 units. That's just the back section. And the client there really thought practically, and it's really usable to a whole lot of different uses and industries. So you got the cantilevered awnings there, some good office space there, double story, and it's got a full perimeter around that you can full vehicle access perimeter. So ideal situation.
Yeah, so it's on a good property and it's a multi-purpose structure. It can be used for manufacturing or a warehouse.
That's great. So on the call here today, we may have some investors, which is great to have you with us. Obviously, the ideal situation, if you were an investor, is to try and find a tenant, multiple tenants for your build, depending on the layout of the design, and really doing a purpose-built structure for them and tying it into a long-term lease. We've had that example work well with a few of our clients. But what the example here is we're not sure who the tenants might be, so we're trying to be as broad-minded, as accommodating as possible. And a good way to do that, I guess, is to maybe look at your local area. Are there any shortages of particular spaces? So maybe is there a shortage of warehousing, or is there a shortage of automated workshops, for example? If there are, by creating these or making these spaces available, could mean that they're quickly filled by tenants and thus giving you a good ROI on your investment. All right, guys?
Yeah, that's good, man.
Awesome. That's point 3 nailed. But make sure the structure is purpose-built for you and your business plan. The 4th point we're touching on today is going to be all around the office area and the fit out. And in our experience, and I suppose we're a bit to blame for this, guys. We're called shed builders, but what we want to try and encourage here is the office component and the fit out. We need to be tying that together with the shed and making it one project. Over to you, Aaron.
Yeah, so obviously, typically, commercial structure is going to require an office. So to tie it in to one is we strongly recommend for initially. Otherwise, there's cause of problems down the track if you decide to tie it in later on. So so there's different ways to do an office. Obviously, you can do it internal. So you could extend your shed an extra bay and then put a mezzanine floor through it. That's an economical option. And then obviously the other option is to do it externally. It's an external office.
So the example here you can see on the screen, Aaron, that's an example of an external office.
That's it.
All right. Yep. Cool. Keep going, man.
Yeah. So with an internal office, when I said that it's an economical approach, it's obviously allowed for in the engineering, and it's quite an easy way to do the office. And it obviously you could do the office underneath, and then it allows for storage up top. And otherwise, you could do your second story on top.
And with the mezzanine, that's basically the structural part of your office.
Yeah.
The rest of it's non-structural, so you can engineer the whole structure as one shed, basically, and then build your office later.
And just on that point, for those that are aesthetically minded, yes, the external office adds a bit more of a commercial feel to the structure. Makes it feel a bit more pleasing on the eye. But there's certain ways, if you are happy with the internal design office where it sits inside the main shed structure, there is ways and means of making the shed appear a bit more pleasing from the front, a bit more easy on the eye, isn't there?
That's it. And also, obviously, make sure you consider the internal of the office. So allow for event space or a showroom. If you need a showroom, you need to allow for that, and also conference rooms and things like that. So be sure to consider that.
So what was the example here you wanted to run through, team?
But this was a client that we've just finished doing their structure, and he wanted to go ahead with the shed. He was keen to get the shed happening because he wanted to be in by June this year, and he hadn't finished designing the office, and which meant that the office was sort of a rush part of the project, and he got us to do the office later, the structural part, and it didn't. It was a different engineer that engineered the office, and so it didn't tie in very well with our structure. So we had to put in additional mullions, additional steel work to make it work, which made it not as economical for him as it could have been if the design was all done together as one up front.
That's great. So I guess the key takeaway here is, and am I right in saying, Shane, that most commercial structures, there would be some need for an office area normally. So don't overlook it, and if possible, bring it together in the initial design phase with your main shed. It's going to give you an efficient design from a building point of view, seamless design, and also an economical outcome, meaning save $1 here and there goes a long way.
Right.
That's it. So that's point 4. And point 5 today, the last point I want to go deep on is looking at additional features. So, and just from the outset, we're not saying these have to be all considered, but a decent shed partner should make you aware of these points so you can consider them for your build. Now,
so some of the features here, so obviously an awning, and ideally a cantilevered awning. So depending on what your business is, but typically it's a good idea for anything that you need to store outside, or otherwise if you've got trucks coming in and out and unloading out of the weather. So definitely a good one to consider for the facility side of things, and also gantry cranes. So your business plan might include a gantry crane. So to allow for it now in the engineering is definitely a good idea. Like for example, our structure here, we put one in it, and it hadn't allowed for a gantry crane.
Yeah, so this structure that we're in was built 15 years ago, and it was designed to have a gantry crane in it. And 15 years on, we've just put a crane in, and it made it a seamless process.
That's great. So if the engineering initially hadn't allowed for that gantry crane, Shane, what could have happened? Like, what would have that meant for us?
Well, it would probably mean the shed's not designed to have a crane in it, so we'd have to put up our own gantry framework that would support that crane.
That's great. So I guess the key takeaway for awnings, gantry crane, maybe a mezzanine floor, these aren't things that have to be done today when you commit to your build. But if a gantry crane or an awning is part of your business plan, it fits in maybe 3-5 years down the track, the engineering for it and maybe some initial work can be done for it in the design phase to save you a fair bit of cash down the track when you commit to that improvement.
Makes it a lot easier just to add it in later.
That's it. And a couple other points here we've just listed. These are obviously ones that are more aimed at early on in the design. Shane, tell us a bit about dado walls and tilt panel.
Yeah, so dado walls and tilt panels are good features to add to your shed. Makes it obviously a stronger build for your structure, more commercial, rather than just tin. And obviously tilt panel can be used for firewalls if needed. And then obviously you can add facades to your shed structure. Say if you have an office that's internal to your shed, you can add a nice facade out of a bit of glazing and nice looking canopies. So there are the features you can have in your shed.
That's great. So there's a few options there that you should be considering, or at least being made aware of in your design phase, to really make sure maybe the biggest investment you make in your life, financial investment, really stacks up for you. That's great. So we'll just a quick recap on the 5 areas we've gone over today that we think could make or break your commercial build. Number one, your ROI. So making sure that the structure you've designed fits in to your business plan and also stacks up financially. So don't overcapitalize. Number two was land. Once you've got your design of your shed, find the land that works for the shed. So you don't want to compromise the shed design just to fit in with what land you might have stumbled upon. Setbacks or easements could really compromise your shed design. Making sure the shed's purpose built for you. So we're going to have a couple of examples around warehousing or manufacturing facilities. These types of structures have different layouts or heights, for example. So think about what the shed's going to be used for if possible. Always try and incorporate the office requirements into the shed design. We want to try and see that as one project. The shed and the office come together as one to ensure the engineering and the build is efficient as possible. And finally, be sure to be exposed to some key features or add-ons that could really add make your shed much more usable and versatile.
And valuable.
And valuable, that's it. All about ROI. So come now to some Q&A, the Q&A session, and we have got some questions come in. The first one's coming from Sharon, Shane. And Sharon's jumped on a point you made in the call. Why would I face my shed to the east? Is that something you can help Sharon with?
Facing the shed to the east is always the best way to face it, because obviously the weather predominantly comes from the west, which obviously affects the engineering on your structure.
Yeah, so we're not saying this is law to face your shed east, but as Shane says, Sharon, where we are in Australia, and I'm not sure where you're dialing in from, but in Australia, most of the weather comes from the west. So we like to face our shed towards the east. Is that right, Shane?
That's correct.
Spot on. We've got a question here come through from Robert. Can we build the entire shed? Sorry, we can't afford to build the entire shed right now. Is it feasible to stage the build? Is that one you can help with, Shane?
Yeah, so to stage the build, it can be done, and it would be feasible if you design the shed to be done in stages. For example, you want to design a shed so that you can add on lengthways. So from the gable side, that's the most economical way to do it. You can't do it. I mean, it's not very economical to build a shed beside another shed, if you know what I mean.
Got that. That's good. Got a question coming here from Leanne. Can you guys assist with the concept design of our structure? Aaron, I reckon you're pretty passionate about concepts. You can help out Leanne?
Yeah, 100%. No, that's my favourite thing to do. So reach out and we'll actually refer to the next slide.
And sorry, we're almost running out of time here, but there's one more question coming too from Jane. G'day, Jane. I think you're from Beechworth. Shout out to Jane Casey on the call.
Oh, yeah.
Should you build the concrete floor before the shed or after? Shane?
I think it's a good idea to build the structure on footings and then pour the slab later internally to the shed. That way, you don't stuff your slab while you're building, and you also can seal your shed up easily.
So I guess on smaller sheds, and we're talking, sheds probably we don't really do, but commonly the slab would be poured first, and then the shed would be built. But on the larger structures, and the examples you would have seen here today, Jane, those few photos we've gone over, the shed's always been constructed first, and then there's been the slab is poured later on. Is that right, Shane?
That's correct.
Awesome. Okay, well, thanks for the questions that came in. Some great ones that hopefully provide you some value, and I'm always happy to take those. So as promised, for those that have stuck around, great to see you've stuck it out. I hope it's been of value. We're excited to announce a bit of a giveaway for 10 lucky attendees. So I hope you've got your pen and paper at the ready, because Aaron at steelcorp.com.au is the person to contact. The first 10 to reach out to Aaron will receive a free set of concept drawings based on their design. So happy to put something together based on what you've got in mind around your next commercial build or agricultural build or whatever it is. And as a little warm and fuzzy thank you for joining, we'll pass all that concept design up with a 6-pack of SteelTalk beer. So
Just deliver it face to face if you really want to.
that's it. Yeah, we're happy to get out and about. So we can deliver these by hand as well. So Aaron, keep an eye on your email this afternoon. I'm sure it's going to be running very hot.
Will do.
Just to recap, Aaron at steelcorp.com.au is the man to get in touch with. And I can see here, Aaron, some of the people on the call, you've already provided concepts too. So maybe it's a redesign of a concept just to get those beers out to them. Shout out to James Briggs on the call. Good to have you here with us, James. Okay. So that brings us to a close, episode 2 of SteelTalk by SteelCorp. And excited to announce that our next episode, episode 3, will be held on the 26th of August. Keep an eye out in your inbox for an invite to the next event. And the topic for episode 3 is all about the approval process. So episode 1 was budgeting, episode 2 design, and now episode 3 is perhaps a bit more of a tricky one, getting involved with council and getting the sign-offs done. Another quick question coming from Sharon again, and it's relating to, are you expecting steel prices to normalise soon? Great question, Sharon. Be great to have the magic wand to answer that question, or it's been a crazy 12 months of steel pricing. What I might do, Sharon, is we might reach out to you after the call and provide with some feedback there, because conscious we've gone over time just. And so wrapping up, team, great to have you with us today. Keep an eye on your inbox for episode 3, the approval process on the 26th of August. That's a Thursday at 2:30 again. It's been a pleasure to have you with us. And I'm sure Shane and Aaron have enjoyed the session as much as everyone else has. And looking forward to seeing you all on the next episode, episode 3, 26th of August.
Approval process.